Every so often the same photograph travels around the internet, and it always arrives wearing the same caption. A tall black bird with a helmet of bone on its head, a neck the color of a fresh bruise, and a foot that ends in a claw shaped like a curved dagger, the most dangerous bird alive. Sometimes there is a claim attached that a single kick can kill a grown man, that the claw will pass clean through bone. And beneath it the comments fill with the particular blend of alarm and delight we reserve for animals we are relieved to know live a long way off. A dinosaur that forgot to go extinct, a killer in feathers, the last thing anyone would want to meet on a narrow path with no room to step aside. Most of it is even true in the way a rumor is true. The bird is real, the claw is real, and the look on its face when it turns and holds you in a single dark eye is genuinely unsettling the first time it happens, and the second. But the menace, the appetite for it, the sense that here stands an animal out looking for a reason, that part belongs to us and not to the bird. In the last 100 years, along a stretch of Queensland coast that these birds share with towns, farms and tourists, the cassowary has killed 2 human beings, and in both cases it had been pushed past the edge of what it could bear. Once by a teenage boy who was trying to beat it to death, and once by a man who kept one behind wire and fell in front of it. Set those 2 deaths beside the ordinary risks of being alive. The dogs, the livestock, the bees, the traffic on any ordinary morning, and the most dangerous bird alive turns out to be one of the safest large animals you will ever have the chance to stand near, on the single condition it has asked of us all along, which is that it be left alone, because that is what it wants. For all the weaponry, and it is genuinely well armed, the cassowary is among the shyest large animals anywhere on Earth. It lives alone, threading through rainforest so thick that a bird as tall as a person can dissolve into it within a few strides, and its first instinct on meeting a human is almost always to widen the distance between them. What danger there has ever been was nearly always a story about people who would not allow it that distance, who fed it by hand until it forgot to be wary, or backed it into a place it could not leave. The claw is for defending itself and for its disputes with rival cassowaries. What we have been calling danger is, for the most part, a description of us. And the animal beneath the reputation is stranger and older and far quieter than any monster we could invent to replace it. Its kind has been walking through forests like these since long before there were forests quite like these to walk through, and it carries the face we like to hang on dinosaurs for a real reason, though not the reason most people assume. All the while we have spent a century warning one another about what it might do, the bird has simply been going about its work in the green half-light, doing something almost no one thinks to ask about. Something the forest around it quietly cannot manage without. If a slow, unhurried hour in the company of a single animal is the sort of thing you would like more of, subscribing does more than you might think to keep a channel like this one alive. And before we go any further, here is a question worth sitting with. Have you ever stood close to a wild animal and known, beyond any doubt, that it was far more frightened of you than you ever were of it? Leave the answer in the comments. Those small moments are the thing this whole channel is built around. Somewhere along the far north coast of Queensland right now, in the last of the daylight beneath a canopy you will never walk under, one of these birds is standing quite still at the edge of the trees, listening. It is in no hurry, and it knows nothing of the 100 years of stories we have told about what it is. 3 out of every 4 times a cassowary has attacked a human being, the bird had been fed by people before, not threatened, not cornered, but fed. That figure comes from the largest study of these attacks ever made, more than 200 of them pulled from decades of Queensland records, and it quietly takes apart almost everything the animal is famous for. The attacks are real enough. What most of them turn out to be, though, is something far smaller than a monster, the boldness of a wild creature that we taught, one hand out at a time, to expect a meal from anyone who stops. You can watch the whole misunderstanding unfold on a beach. At Etty Bay, a small curve of sand folded into the rainforest on the tropical Queensland coast, cassowaries come down out of the trees and walk the tide line as if the place belongs to them, which, for what it is worth, it did, long before the car park and the caravans. The surf turns over quietly. The air is thick with salt and hot sand and somebody's sunscreen. A bird steps clear of the green wall behind the beach, unhurried and enormous, that vivid blue neck catching the afternoon light, and makes its way down between the towels and the eskies. Children go quiet and still, and a phone or two comes up. And this is what the photographs never quite catch. Even now, even this bold, the bird is still half wild and ready to go. Its head stays high between mouthfuls, its weight held back over its feet, the whole body poised to wheel and disappear into the trees. Whatever it has learned about people and their food sits lightly over something much older and far more careful, which has not gone anywhere. For a few long seconds, the most dangerous bird alive stands close enough to touch, working out whether these particular humans are worth the bother, and then it decides they are not, and it moves off down the sand, and whatever danger there was goes with it. The study was the work of a biologist named Christopher Coffran, who went back through the record of cassowary attacks in Queensland and laid them out in the Journal of Zoology in 1999. Of 150 attacks on people, the great majority followed that same shape. A bird that had learned to link humans with food, growing pushy, then aggressive when the food ran out. In 7 cases out of 10, the bird simply ran at the person and pulled up short, and an actual strike with the foot was rare. The word attack is doing a great deal of quiet work there. Most of what the record files under it is a large, hungry animal walking up to someone and demanding, a mugging at worst, and often not even that. And the single most repeated claim about the bird, that one downward rake of that inner claw can disembowel a person, turns out, across the entire written record, never once to have happened to a human being. The claw is a serious instrument. The story we tell about what it does to us is only a story. It has even so killed, twice in 100 years, and both are worth telling properly, because both are the exception that shows how the rule works. The first was in April 1926, near Mossman, in the same wet country where these birds still live. A 16-year-old named Philip McLean and his younger brother had run a cassowary down on the family's land and set about killing it with clubs and with a dog. Given no way out, the bird did what a cornered cassowary does. In the chaos, the older boy fell, the bird came down on him, and its claw opened a blood vessel in his neck. He bled to death within minutes. For most of a century, his was the only human life the species had ever taken, and even now the retellings like to add a flourish the coroner never recorded, that the claw found the jugular, because a single clean, fatal stroke makes a better story than the truth, which is only that 2 boys and a dog set upon an animal that could not escape, and it fought back, and one of the boys died. The second death came 93 years later, and not in a rainforest at all. In April 2019, on a small property near Gainesville, Florida, a man of 75 named Marvin Hajos kept cassowaries and, in fact, bred them as exotic livestock, which in that state he was permitted to do. One morning he fell in their pen, and with a man suddenly down and helpless at its feet inside the wire, one of his birds turned on him, and he did not survive the injuries. The deadliest bird in the world had taken its second human life in a century, as a captive animal on the far side of the planet, from the one person who had chosen to keep it. 2 deaths then across 100 years, and the same shape sits inside both. Neither bird went hunting for a person. In each case, a human had first done the one thing a cassowary cannot abide, sealing off every way out, with a club in the one instance, a fence in the other, until the animal, left no choice, reached for the only answer it owned. Set that beside the creatures we are genuinely right to fear, and even those 2 deaths very nearly vanish. Crocodiles kill something close to 1,000 people every year. Hippos, perhaps 500. The cassowary has managed 2 in a century, and only when it was cornered or caged. The arithmetic runs backward as well, harder than most people would guess. When Cothron looked at the times a cassowary had gone after a dog or another domestic animal, almost all of them were birds defending themselves. Far more often than it is the thing worth fearing, the cassowary is the thing being chased. So where did the monster come from? Some of it is official. Guinness World Records lists all 3 kinds of cassowary as the most dangerous birds on Earth. And a title like that travels much further and much faster than the careful footnotes that ought to travel with it. Some of it is the honest strangeness of the animal, which is large and armed, and regards you with the flat, unbothered attention of a creature that has been here far longer than we have. But most of the monster, in the end, came from us, from the very old human habit of needing something to be afraid of, and the way one vivid, frightening claim will always outrun a shelf of quiet corrections. The truer version was there the whole time. It was simply less exciting, and it asked us to feel something more awkward than fear. Back at Etty Bay, the bird has reached the far end of the sand. It turns entirely untroubled and walks toward the tree line. And in the last moment before the forest folds shut around it, you can see the whole animal at once. The deep black body, the odd crest of bone, and low to the ground, half lost in the roll of the walk, that single long dagger of a claw. About what the bird wants, the reputation was wrong in nearly every particular. About what it is made from, it was not wrong at all. And a body built like that, carried by an animal that wants no part of a fight, is worth understanding on its own terms, because whatever that claw is for, it was never for us. On the floor of the Daintree, in the dim green underwater light that reaches the ground of a rainforest, a foot presses down into the wet leaf litter. Up close, it is barely a bird's foot at all. It is heavy and reptilian, the skin pebbled and leathery and the colour of old bark, drawn tight over bones nearly legible beneath it. There are 3 toes, splayed wide to carry the weight, and nothing behind them. No 4th toe to grip a branch, because this is not an animal that has any use for branches. The 2 outer toes end in ordinary, blunt claws. The inner one ends in something else. A single spike of dark horn as long as a kitchen knife, 10 centimeters and more in a big bird, curved to a point and worn genuinely sharp by a lifetime of walking. Then the foot lifts and comes down again, and it does so almost without a sound. A bird as heavy as a grown man moves across a floor of dry leaves, and you hear next to nothing, and that silence, more than the claw, is the first thing that tells you what you are standing beside. That inner claw is the piece of the animal the old fear was built on, and it rewards a careful look because the fear had the object exactly right, even as it had the intent exactly wrong. A cassowary does not slash about like something from a film. When it truly commits to the foot, it leaps, driving both legs down and forward so that the whole of its weight arrives behind that single point. The leg swinging down like a piston, the claw leading everything the animal has gathered into a few square millimeters of horn. It is a serious way to be struck, which is precisely why it so seldom comes to that. And there is something in the shape of the thing that halts people the first time they see it, a flicker of recognition they cannot immediately place. What they are recognizing is a raptor, not the bird kind, but the other kind, the sickle-clawed runners of the deep past, the velociraptors and their cousins, who carried a killing claw on the second toe in very nearly this arrangement. The resemblance is real, and it is worth being clear about what it is. The cassowary did not inherit that claw from a dinosaur. It arrived at the same design on its own from a completely different direction, and tens of millions of years later, the way a shark and a dolphin arrived at the same shape without being any kind of relation. That is the more unsettling fact, the longer you sit with it, not that the deep past left a monster behind, but that the same alarming tool can be invented twice over by two animals with nothing whatever to do with one another. Step back from the foot, and the rest is built to the same scale of seriousness. A large cassowary stands as tall as the person facing it, close to 2 meters, and the heaviest of them, always females, can reach 76 kilograms, which makes this the weightiest bird on the Australian continent, and by most careful counts, the third heaviest bird alive, behind only the 2 kinds of ostrich. The emu stands taller on its longer legs, but the cassowary is the denser, more solid creature, built low and heavy and all muscle, the kind of animal that shoulders through country a person would have to cut a way into. To stand near one is to feel the weight of it before you have worked out anything else, the way it holds its head level and still and turns it to bring a single eye to bear, the unhurried certainty of a large animal that rarely has to hurry. Nothing about it is slight, everything about it is loaded. And then, having taken the measure of the weapon, you notice the feathers, and the animal turns unfamiliar in a completely different way. These are not feathers as a garden bird would know them. A cassowary's plumage hangs off it in long, coarse, drooping strands, loose and shaggy and far closer to hair than to anything that ever lifted a bird off the ground. An ordinary feather holds its shape because thousands of microscopic hooks zip its filaments into a smooth, sealed blade. A cassowary's have surrendered those hooks entirely. The strands hang free and separate, and every feather grows a second full shaft off the first, so the whole coat carries the depth and the disorder of fur. There is nothing to fly with. The wings have dwindled to a few stiff, naked quills with no vein at all, laid against the flanks like a handful of black knitting needles, and there is no tail to speak of. When it rains, and in that forest it is nearly always about to rain, the water beads and runs straight off the coarse outer strands, and the bird stands in the downpour as though it had not noticed. What reads from across a clearing as a sleek black bird is, from close in, a heavy animal wearing something halfway between feathers and a pelt. Look harder at the black itself, and it too does the unexpected. It shines with the deep oiled gloss you would sooner expect from a raven. But a raven's shine is a skin of shifting colour laid over the feather, an iridescence that slides as the bird turns in the light. The cassowary's gloss is nothing of the kind. Its black is flat, plain pigment, and the shine sitting on top of it is pure architecture, the smooth, bare shafts of those hair-like feathers throwing the light back all in one direction, in the exact way that light comes off a horse's flank or a head of human hair. As far as anyone has yet found, it is the only bird that shines the way a mammal does. The same sleight of hand runs up the neck. That startling blue, the colour the old captions reached for whenever they wanted the animal to look venomous, is not a pigment either. There is no blue substance anywhere in the skin at all. The blue is constructed rather than coloured in, the tissue built so finely that it throws the short blue wavelength straight back out while letting the rest sink through, which is very nearly the reason the daytime sky is blue and not some blue object hung up in it. Above the blue rises the bony helmet, and below it hang two loose folds of red skin at the throat, and what either of them is truly for remains one of the genuine unsolved puzzles about the whole animal. Take the whole of it in at once, the silent foot and its ancient claw, the loaded body, the coat that is halfway to hair, the skin that makes its own color out of raw light. And what stands in front of you is a working animal, spare and economical, with nothing on it for show. It fits its forest the way a key fits a lock. Standing there in the low green light, it looks like something that stepped out of a far older world and has not yet caught up to this one. And the impression is not wrong so much as unfinished. The line it belongs to really is ancient, older than this rainforest and older than any creature that would ever learn to be afraid of it. But the animal on the leaf litter is no relic left over from anything, and the true story of how it came to be standing here at all, looking so far out of its own time, is stranger than the resemblance alone could ever let on. So why does it look the way it does? That reptilian foot, the unblinking prehistoric stare, the whole insistence that here is an animal which ought to have gone down with the dinosaurs and somehow didn't. The honest answer is stranger than the question, and it starts by agreeing with the impression before quietly taking it apart. Because the impression is, in the narrowest sense, exactly right. The cassowary is a dinosaur, not a distant relative of one, not a throwback to one. A dinosaur, in the same plain way that a wolf is a mammal. Birds did not so much descend from the dinosaurs as remain among them. They are the single branch of that vast family that lived through the catastrophe and is walking around still. The case stopped being an argument decades ago. It is written in the wishbone, in the 3 long fingers folded away inside every wing, in the hundreds of small feathered dinosaurs now lifted out of the rock of China, animals caught halfway between the two categories we once kept carefully apart. But this is precisely where the popular story goes wrong, because it treats the cassowary as somehow more of a dinosaur than the rest, a leftover from the old world, wandering about unchanged while everything else moved on. It is not. The sparrow on a windowsill is exactly as much a dinosaur as the cassowary is, and so is the chicken, and so is the pigeon in the gutter. The cassowary has simply kept the family resemblance on the outside, in the foot and the crest and the heavy tread, where the sparrow tucks it away beneath song and flight. There is no living fossil here, only a modern bird that happens to look the part. The real history is far better than a leftover would be, and it moves. Run the line backward, and it does not stop politely at the edge of the dinosaur age. It runs clean through the end of it. 66 million years ago, on what may have been the single worst day this planet has known, a rock some 10 kilometers across struck the shallow sea off what is now Mexico, and the world caught fire. The great dinosaurs, the ones the cassowary is forever measured against, did not come through it. Almost nothing large did. The animals that survived were the small ones, the burrowers, the hiders, the things quick enough to already be somewhere else. And the ancestors of the cassowary at that exact moment were precisely that. Not giants of any kind, but small birds, light on the wing, that could still fly. They lived because they were nothing at all like the animal their descendants would become. Then the fires burned down, and the ash came sifting out of the sky, and the world that emerged from underneath it was empty in one very particular way. The enormous plant eaters that had held the ground for more than 100 million years were simply gone, and the ground lay open. Over the long ages that followed, and in more than one corner of the world at once, some of those small flyers began coming down out of the air for good. Generation upon generation, the wings shortened and the flight fell away, and the bodies lengthened and thickened and rose, until birds that had once weighed less than a magpie stood taller than the people who would one day find their bones, and the emptiness the giants had left behind was filled again, quietly, by the children of the creatures that had outlived them. For a long time the story was told more tidily than that. The great flightless birds, the ostrich in Africa, the rheas of South America, the emu and the cassowary in Australia, the moa and kiwi of New Zealand, the vanished elephant birds of Madagascar, were assumed to be one ancient flightless stock, a single earthbound ancestor drawn slowly apart as the southern supercontinent, Gondwana, broke into the continents we know. It is an elegant idea, and it is wrong. The family tree, once it could finally be read straight from the bird's own genes, holds one detail that undoes the whole of it. Sitting right in among these grounded giants is a small partridge-like South American bird called the tinamou, which never once gave up the air. A flyer in the very middle of the flightless can mean only one thing. That flight was not shed a single time in a single ancestor, but let go again and again, on its own, at least 3 separate times and very probably more, on landmass after landmass, each line finding the same answer with no help from any other. The whole grand shape, the long neck and the long legs and the great earthbound body was built from scratch on continent after continent, the way the killing claw was built twice over, only now at the scale of an entire animal. And the strangest confirmation of all is folded into the cassowary's own family. Step past the emu, and its nearest kin turn out to be a pair with no business being related, the kiwi of New Zealand and the elephant bird of Madagascar, the heaviest bird that ever lived. 2 creatures on opposite shores of a wide ocean, close cousins, which makes no sense whatever until you remember that far enough back down the line, their ancestors had wings and used them. There is something in that worth stopping over. A single relic surviving out of the deep past would be a small miracle of endurance and a familiar sort of story. This is the rarer and larger thing, not one survival, but the same magnificent shape arrived at over and over, independently, by birds that never met and never could have, the emptied ground of a young world, filled again and again with the very same answer. Against the whole of that deep time, the cassowary itself is almost young. It and the emu went their separate ways only around 30 million years ago, recent by the reckoning of this story, and the Australian rock holds a bird from that early world, so reminiscent of both that the researchers who named it fused the 2 words into one and called it Emuarius, the emu wary, dug out of the old bone beds of Riversley and the dry country around Lake Eyre. Everything that now makes the animal look so impossibly old, the crest, the claw, the shaggy half-hair coat, is recent work, assembled by a young and thriving line, not preserved from an ancient one. The bird in the Daintree is no fugitive from the age of reptiles, quietly running out its final years. It comes from a modern and successful family whose deep talent, again and again, and in place after place, has been to rediscover exactly how to be enormous and earthbound. That is a far stranger thing to carry than the captions imagine, and a far better one. The bird in the forest is the living end of a line that flew through the fire that killed the dinosaurs and came back down onto the ground on the far side of it. Not one of the great reptiles hanging grimly on, but the child of the small survivor that outlasted every last one of them. And so it stands there now, in the low green light of an ordinary morning, 66 million years downstream of all that fire and flight and slow reinvention. Every part of that history built into its body, and none of it anywhere in its mind. A bird entirely at home in a world with no memory at all of what it cost to put it here. The first sign of it is not a sound at all. Stand in the rainforest early, in the grey light before the day has properly arrived, and there is already plenty to hear. The drip of last night's rain off 10,000 leaves, the first insects winding themselves up, a whipbird somewhere cracking the quiet clean in half. And then, running underneath all of it, something different. A low pressure that seems to come up through the ground and the air at the same time, a slow throb below the base of the chest, closer to standing beside an idling truck than to listening to a bird. It rolls in, holds and fades, then returns in the same unhurried pulse, and only by the second or third of them have your ears finally caught up and begun to file it as a sound, a deep, felt hum with no direction in it, seeming to arrive from every side of the forest at once. Follow it back through the wet undergrowth and you come upon the cassowary standing in a gap in the trees, its head lowered almost to its own feet, the whole body faintly trembling, the loose black feathers shivering along its back, and the bare skin of its throat swelling outward, wider and wider, until the neck has nearly doubled in girth. It is booming, making out of that swollen throat one of the lowest sounds any bird on earth is known to produce. The note it reaches sits at around 32 cycles a second, 32 hertz in the language of sound, and that figure means very little until it is set against the limits of a human ear. Our hearing in a young and healthy person gives out somewhere near 20 hertz. Below that lies infrasound, the register of things too vast or too slow to hear at all. Earthquakes, the deep muttering of an approaching storm, the low calls elephants send rumbling to one another, far out of range of any human listener. The cassowary's boom lives right down at that edge, a hair above the floor of what an ear can find, which is exactly why you feel it in your ribs a moment before your ears will agree that it is a sound. Most people who have ever stood within reach of one have noticed it, if at all, only as a vague unease, a sense that something enormous was nearby, and never once suspected that they were being spoken clean over the top of, in a voice pitched almost beneath their notice. The making of the sound is stranger than the sound itself. Before it booms, the bird gulps at the air to fill the sacs inside its body, then draws itself up, drops its head down toward the ground, and lets the note out in long level pulses, each around 3/4 of a second, the whole animal shuddering with the effort. And the part that matters most is where the sound is coming from, because almost everyone guesses wrong. It is a natural thing to look at a cassowary and assume the great bony crown on its head is the instrument. A horn, a sounding chamber, the obvious source of a noise like that. It is not. The boom is generated deep in the throat and pushed out through that inflating neck, the tight drum of naked skin doing all the broadcasting, while the helmet above it sits there contributing nothing a listener could hear. Which leaves an obvious question hanging. Why would any animal choose to speak in a register a listener can barely register? The answer is written into the forest itself. High sounds, the whistles and chatters that most birds trade in, are fragile things. They scatter off leaves and trunks and are swallowed inside a few tens of meters of thick growth. A very low sound behaves in the opposite way entirely. Its long, slow waves bend around obstacles rather than shattering against them, and roll on through the timber for great distances, giving up almost nothing on the way. For a bird that needs to be heard far off, in the densest cover on the continent, it is the one voice that will carry, and that, most likely, is the whole point of it. This is an animal that spends nearly the entirety of its life alone. Cassowaries are solitary and thinly spread, each keeping to its own stretch of forest, crossing paths with another only rarely and for the most part reluctantly. The boom is the sound of one solitary creature reaching through the green dark for another of its kind, a way of announcing its own presence or its claim on a patch of ground to another it cannot see, and who may be the better part of a mile away. That distance and that solitude are much of the reason so few people ever truly meet one. It is a genuinely odd thing about the cassowary, a bird that stands shoulder high to a person in country that people walk through every day, and yet a person can live at the edge of a Queensland rainforest for years and count their close sightings on one hand. It has a gift for dissolving, a black shape at the far edge of the undergrowth that is simply not there when the eye goes back to it. And for all that size and nearness, we understand astonishingly little about how the animal actually takes in the world. What it truly sees, how well it hears, what it reads in the smells drifting up from the leaf litter, nearly all of it remains a blank. We know the sound it sends out far better than we know anything it receives. It lives, in that sense, right at the edge of our senses and the edge of our knowledge at once. And then, just as a picture settles, earthbound, hidden, a creature of the deep forest floor, it does the last thing anyone expects of a heavy, flightless bird. It swims, and swims well. It will wade into a river and cross without hesitation, the body low and half submerged, only the head and the ridge of the back cutting the surface like something far stranger than a bird, and it will take to the open sea. Nearly a century ago, a naturalist watched one strike out across the water toward an offshore island, a good couple of kilometers from any shore, and in the last few years, cassowaries have been filmed wading calmly into the surf off the North Queensland coast, riding the swell as untroubled by the ocean as by everything else. Back in the gap in the trees, the last pulse rolls outward and drops away below the range of human hearing before it has properly finished, so that it is impossible to say quite where the sound ended and the silence began. And the bird goes with it. By the time the forest has fully settled, it has stepped back into the undergrowth without a sound, and the clearing stands empty, and anyone who heard the boom is left half wondering whether they heard anything at all. What stays behind is the strangeness of the instrument, the swelling throat, the drum of bare skin, and the one part of the animal that took no part in it. The helmet on its head made no sound and served no purpose anyone could name, and it has been sitting up there, above every cassowary that has ever lived, waiting for someone to work out what it is for. The casque, the tall blade-like crest of bone and horn that rises from the top of a cassowary's skull, is the first thing anyone notices about the animal, and, after more than a century of trying, the last thing anyone has managed to explain. It looks so purposeful. It looks, in fact, like two purposes at once. Set on the head of a creature that shoulders through the thickest forest on the continent, it reads immediately as armor, a helmet, a ram, a shield against the thrashing undergrowth. And perched just above that impossibly deep voice, it looks just as readily like an instrument, a horn or a sounding board, an amplifier for the lowest sound in the forest. Both impressions are natural, and both are almost certainly wrong. Working out why is a small tour through the honest limits of what we know about even the animals we think we know well. Start with the helmet. The trouble with the idea arrives the moment anyone looks inside one. A cassowary's casque stands as much as 20 centimeters tall, high and imposing enough to make the armor reading feel obvious, and it is very nearly hollow. Beneath the sheath of keratin lies a shell of bone only 2 or 3 millimeters thick, laid out in a fine open honeycomb around a core of air, delicate struts and blood vessels, the whole thing so light and so fragile that a person pressing hard with a thumb can crush it inward. It is less a helmet than a stiffened bubble. When researchers reconstructed one in fine detail, it proved not to be a single bone at all, but a small architecture of several fused together and capped by an element found in no other skull anywhere. An unmistakably specialized structure with no known job to do. No animal would batter its way through anything with a thing that breaks under a firm touch, and the closer anyone has looked, the less the casque resembles protective gear and the more it resembles an ornament. The instrument idea comes apart just as cleanly, and for a reason that lies well below the head. The boom is produced deep in the throat and pushed out through the swelling neck, and the crest takes no part in it. When researchers scanned the inside of the casque to be sure, they found no way in. The whole structure is sealed off from the airways, with no channel, no chamber, nothing to carry a note up into it. Whatever the casque is doing, it is not the megaphone it appears to be. Acoustically, it is a dead end. For a long time, that was where the matter rested. Two obvious answers ruled out, and nothing to put in their place. Then someone thought to point a thermal camera at a living cassowary, and for the first time the casque did something visible. On the screen, in the strange, false colors such cameras paint, the crest came alive. On a hot day it burned bright against the cooler body, a plume of heat streaming off it while the day's warmth poured away. On a cold morning it fell dark and quiet, the same shade as everything around it, the bird holding its heat inside. Across a run of birds and temperatures the pattern held. The casque works measurably as a radiator, a window through which a large animal in a hot, wet climate can shed the warmth it needs to lose. After a century of guessing, here at last was a genuine, testable function. And here, too, is where honesty has to intrude, because a function is not the same as a reason. A cassowary sheds heat perfectly well through its bill and its bare legs and neck, and thousands of birds keep their temperature in order with no crest of any kind. The casque can act as a radiator. Whether that is why it is there at all is a very different question. The explanation most researchers now lean toward, and lean is the honest word for it, is that the casque is a signal, a part of the animal meant to be read by other cassowaries. The circumstantial case is a decent one. The casque is absent in chicks and grows steadily through the years, reaching full size only at 4 or 5, so a large one is a fair advertisement of an older, established, capable bird. And there is one detail that tilts the whole question in an unexpected direction. The biggest casques of all belong to the females. In a bird whose female is the larger and more commanding sex, she is also the one carrying the grandest crest. A strange arrangement and a telling one, though telling of exactly what has never once been put to a proper test. The signaling idea remains for now a well-reasoned guess wearing the clothes of an answer. And then, just as the question seemed to be narrowing toward that single word, signal, it opened straight back up again. In a study published in 2026, researchers held ultraviolet light to the casques of museum specimens and living birds and found that the keratin glows. Under UV, the crest of the cassowary and of its single-wattled cousin to the north lights up in broad hidden patches, a fluorescent pattern that simply is not there in ordinary daylight. The small dwarf cassowary, alone among them with its plain black crest, does not glow at all. A secret luminous marking, in other words, on the exact part of the animal no one could already account for. It is a startling find, and the researchers who made it were admirably careful about what it does and does not mean. A glow a laboratory instrument can pick up is not proof that a cassowary can see it, still less that it carries any meaning for the bird. It may be a message hidden in a light we cannot share. It may be nothing more than a quirk of the chemistry of how the crest is built. For now, no one can say which. So this is the honest state of it, and it is worth saying plainly. After more than 100 years of attention, with dissections and microscanners and thermal cameras and ultraviolet lamps all trained on it, no one can tell you for certain what the casque is for. It sheds heat, though probably not for that reason. It may advertise its owner, though no one has shown that it does. It glows in a light the bird may or may not be able to see. It might be doing several of these at once, or one thing that has not yet occurred to anyone. There is a particular pleasure in a fact like that, a large, conspicuous ornament on one of the most famous animals in Australia, worn openly in broad daylight, that has quietly outlasted every clever person who set out to explain it. The bird, needless to say, is untroubled by any of this. It lifts its crowned head, turns, and carries the riddle back into the trees without a backward glance at the cameras. And it leaves behind the one clue that refuses to go away, that the finest crest of all sits on the head of the female, a clue that points, in the end, not at the head at all, but at something stranger. The question of how a creature this solitary ever finds another of its kind, and what exactly she is telling him. For an answer, the best place to look is a stretch of the Daintree called Cooper Creek, where for the better part of 30 years a single cassowary has been watched and named and come to be known almost as a neighbour. The people there call her Big Bertha. She is enormous, with a casque that leans a little to one side, and by the reckoning of the naturalists who have followed her, though no one can be sure, she may be 45 years old, perhaps more. Almost everything we understand about how these solitary, rarely seen birds actually run their family lives comes from a scattering of individuals like her, followed patiently, year on year, along a single creek. Big Bertha is the established power along hers. Smaller cassowaries pass through her ground, and she tolerates them or she does not. And when she means to make the point, she does something worth watching. She draws herself up to her full height, stretches the neck straight and high, and simply stands there, motionless and staring, the whole 2 meters of her held like a raised hand. And whatever she is fixed on, more often than not, backs quietly away. That alone overturns the picture most people carry of birds. In nearly every familiar species, it is the male who is the larger and the gaudier and the more forward, the one who displays and competes and struts while the female looks on and picks. The cassowary runs the other way. Here the female is the bigger sex by a long margin. A large one can weigh close to 60 kilograms, outweighing a grown man, and better than twice what a full-grown male carries. And she is the brighter, the more dominant, and the holder of the ground. The males are the smaller, quieter, more careful animals, moving through the range of a female who overtops them in every sense, and who, when the season turns, is the one that does the choosing. What Big Bertha does with that season is the strangest part of all. She takes a mate, for years now, most often the same one, a male the observers call Crinkle Cut, a smaller bird whose casque is barely half the size of hers. He approaches her low and cautious, dwarfed by her, and the two keep company only briefly, through courtship and mating and the laying of a single clutch. Then she leaves him with those eggs and moves on, to another male, and after him another, several across one season, each handed a clutch of his own to tend, while she carries on to the next. As far as the people who have watched her can tell, she works through them in an order of her own keeping. The word for this is polyandry, one female to many males, and it is rare enough among animals to be worth stopping over. Though honesty asks for a small footnote here, because the word is doing rather more work than the evidence strictly allows. No one has ever run the parentage tests that would settle which male fathered which chick, or ruled out that a single nest holds eggs from more than one female, or that the whole business is looser and messier than the neat sequence it appears to be from the outside. What we have is a careful account of what can be seen. What is actually passing in the genes remains for now unread. What she leaves in each nest is worth seeing in its own right. The male scrapes a shallow bed into the leaf litter, and into it she lays 3 to 5 eggs that are, by any measure, extraordinary things. They are large, after only the ostrich and the emu, the biggest eggs laid by any bird alive, each one around 600 grams, roughly the heft of a whole carton of a dozen hen's eggs gathered into a single shell. And they are an astonishing colour, a deep, luminous pea green, like a glass bottle held to the light, or the cut flesh of a ripe avocado, the green laid into the shell as a pigment while it forms. Over the weeks that follow, that vivid green fades slowly toward a dull, mossy olive until the whole clutch has all but disappeared into the litter of the forest floor, and once they are laid, she is done with them. She walks away from the nest and does not return, and she takes no part whatever in the weeks of sitting or the long months of rearing that follow. This is the moment a certain human reflex takes hold and reaches for a certain set of words: abandonment, the cold mother, the parent who lays her clutch and shrugs it off. It is an understandable reflex, and it is entirely wrong, and it is wrong in a way worth understanding, because it comes of quietly laying the rules of a mammal over an animal that never signed up to them. Among cassowaries, the labour simply divides along a different seam. The female's whole vast contribution is the egg itself, a costly and demanding thing to build, several of them across a season, and everything after the egg belongs to the male, the sitting, the guarding, the raising. She is not neglecting a duty. There is no duty here of the kind we keep imagining for her. And male-only care is no cassowary aberration either. It runs right through the bird world, in emus and rheas and the little lily-trotting jacanas and a scattering of others, a proven and ancient way of raising young that simply happens to leave the mother out of it. Her part is to hold the ground, take the mates, and make the eggs, and Big Bertha, 30 years on and still commanding her creek, has done all three about as well as a cassowary can. Strip away the mammal's overlay, and what remains is neither cruelty nor devotion, but an arrangement that works and has worked for a very long time. Big Bertha will move on along her creek and take another male before the season is out and lay again. Crinkle Cut and the ones who came before and after him will lower themselves onto their clutches and settle. Not one of them has the faintest notion that the arrangement is a strange one. It is only the way a cassowary makes more cassowaries, and it has carried the species forward since long before there was anyone about to find it odd. She is already going, the great dark shape of her thinning away between the trunks. And behind her, in the scrape in the leaf litter, the male lowers his body down over the clutch of darkening green eggs and goes still. He will hardly move from that spot again for the better part of 2 months. The scrape is nothing much, a shallow dish of trampled leaves and moss on the floor of the forest, somewhere in the wet country behind Mission Beach, roofed only by the canopy far overhead. He settles his body down into it, drawing the clutch in against the bare, warm skin of his belly, and there he stays. Rain comes down through the leaves and runs off his back. The light shifts from grey to grey again as the days turn over. Insects work across the litter within easy reach of his bill, and he lets them go. Once in a while he rises carefully and reaches down to roll the eggs over with his beak and his feet, turning each one so it warms evenly on every side, and then he lowers himself again and is still. From a few paces off you would take him for a shadow or a low mound of dark, wet leaves, the one thing that matters folded quietly into the floor of the forest, doing its work and almost nothing else. This goes on for close to 50 days, 7 weeks, near enough, of sitting, and through nearly all of it, he eats almost nothing. In any other part of the year, a cassowary spends its days moving and foraging across a wide reach of forest. Now the male gives that up completely and stays with the eggs, taking next to nothing, leaving them only rarely and only long enough to snatch a drink. One day is barely distinguishable from the last. The forest carries on around him, the other birds and the rain and the slow wheel of the light, and he simply remains, the same shape in the same place, hour after hour and week upon week. A body that goes 7 weeks without feeding pays for it in the only currency it has, which is itself. Over those weeks the flesh goes off him. The heavy, solid bird thins down, the flesh falling away from the frame until the shape of the bones begins to show, and by the time the eggs are ready, he is a gaunt shadow of the animal that first sat down on them. It is worth pausing on this plainly without any decoration, because the plain version is the remarkable one. A large wild animal starving itself for the better part of 2 months, motionless in the rain, to hold a clutch of eggs at an even warmth, and giving no sign that it costs him anything at all beyond the steady vanishing of his own weight. He is not only enduring the time, he is working it. Several times a day the eggs are turned and shifted and checked, kept warm and kept dry beneath him. And he is watchful in a way he never otherwise is, because this is the one season in a cassowary's life when it will readily stand and fight. And when it does, it fights for the clutch and not for itself. The shy animal that spends the rest of its year stepping quietly out of everyone's way will, on the nest, hold its ground against nearly anything, which is a good part of why so few nests are ever found, and why the few that are best left well alone. And then, after the 50 days, the eggs begin to rock and to crack, and what climbs out of them is nothing like the animal anyone has been picturing. The chicks are small enough to cup in 2 hands, and they are not black, and they have no helmet and no blue skin and no dagger. None of it. They are soft and downy and striped from end to end, cream and dark brown, running the length of the body in long, bold bands, the very pattern a wild boar's piglet wears, or a young tapir, the oldest disguise there is for staying alive, small on a dappled forest floor. Set down among the fallen leaves and the broken light, a cassowary chick simply comes apart into stripes and shadow. For the first months of its life, it will look like this, nothing like its father, dressed to disappear rather than to be seen. With the hatching, the harder half of the work begins. The father raises the brood alone, and he will do it for around 9 months, and sometimes a great deal longer. At the start, the chicks can manage almost nothing for themselves. They cannot yet swallow the fruit that will one day be nearly their whole existence. So he becomes their forager, turning the litter for insects and grubs and soft small things, setting food down in front of them, leading them from one fruiting tree to the next across ground he knows and they do not. Everything they will need, which foods to trust, where the good trees stand and when they drop, how to read the floor of the forest, they learn by walking behind him through it, a loose line of striped young trailing the big dark shape of the father, one day at a time. And here the story turns hard, because most of them will not finish it. The forest floor is a dangerous place for something small and slow and striped, and a father may spend himself down over a clutch and carry the brood for months and see only one of them reach its full growth, sometimes none. When the young are grown enough to manage on their own, at 9 months or 15 or more, the arrangement ends as abruptly as it began. The father, who has spent months and a fair part of his own body on them, turns on them and drives them out of his territory and sends them off to find ground of their own. And then, his body slowly filling back out, he readies himself to do the whole of it again. It is a sequence with no soft edges in it and no need of any. The long fast, the striped young, the months of leading them through the trees, the sudden ending, the same sequence turning over in these forests across a stretch of time almost too deep to feel, each father in his turn spending himself down to launch the next handful into the world. And every part of it, from the starved male on the nest to the striped chicks pulling grubs out of the litter, comes down in the end to one thing: food. Which leaves the plainest question there is, and the one that turns out to matter most of all. What exactly does a cassowary live on? The great majority of it is fruit, and one of the fruits is a poison. Before the heat comes up on the floor of the Daintree, the forest smells of wet earth and rotting leaves, and threaded through all of it, the thick, sweet, turning smell of fallen fruit, ripe and overripe and beginning to ferment where it lies. A cassowary moves through it without hurry, head low, following the scent and the memory of where the good trees stand. It stops. On the ground before it lies a fruit the size of a small fist, a deep bruised blue-purple, its skin split where it struck the earth. A cassowary plum, dropped in the night from the tree that carries the bird's own name. The cassowary tips its head, takes the plum in its bill, and swallows it whole, seed and all, and walks on. And the thing it has just eaten, flesh and juice and stone together, would leave almost any other animal in that forest gravely ill. The cassowary plum is a close relation of some of the most feared plants in the tropics. Its flesh is laced with cardiac glycosides, the family of compounds that act straight on the heart, the same kind of poison carried by its cousin the suicide tree, whose seeds have been used across parts of Asia to kill. A mouthful would be a serious matter for most mammals and most birds. Enough of it would stop a heart outright. The cassowary eats it as a staple, takes it down whole, and moves off apparently none the worse, one heavy stony seed the richer and entirely untroubled. How it manages this without harm is, like a great deal about the animal, not something anyone has fully worked out. Nor is the plum the only such food. The floor of these forests is littered with fruits that are too big, too armored, or too toxic for the creatures around them to bother with, and the cassowary, one after another, works its way through them all. That is the shape of the whole diet. The great bulk of what a cassowary eats is fruit, and the sheer range of it is hard to take in. Going back to the patient field studies of the 1980s, when researchers first began sorting through what these birds leave behind on the forest floor and adding in everything logged since, cassowaries have been recorded eating the fruit of well over 200 kinds of plant across their range, better than 230 at the last full reckoning. It works a larder that almost nothing else can fully use. The giant fruits, the stone-hard ones, the poisonous ones, the blue quandong with its pit like a knuckle of bone, the wild nutmegs, and above all, the ones whose seeds are simply too large to go down any other animal's throat. Fruit is the heart of it, though not quite the whole. When the fruiting slows, a cassowary will take fungi, snails, fallen insects, the occasional small dead thing, an opportunist at the edges of a life that turns, above everything, on what drops from the trees, and it feeds in the plainest way imaginable. It does not hunt, it forages on foot, the way you might walk an orchard the morning after a storm. But an orchard stays put, and a rainforest does not. The trees a cassowary lives by fruit at different times and in different corners of its range, a scatter of moments spread across the year and across miles of forest. So the bird is more or less always walking, a slow, patient circuit of its ground, calling in on the trees it knows are heavy that month and gathering up whatever has already come down. It is a picker-up of windfalls, unhurried, reading the floor as it goes, most active in the cool of early morning and the last of the afternoon, and resting out the heat between. The one thing that truly sets its feeding apart is what happens at the throat, where a smaller animal has to tear the flesh from a large fruit and leave the stone, or crack a seed to reach the kernel inside. The cassowary simply opens its bill and takes the whole thing, flesh, skin, and a seed the size of a walnut or bigger, and lets it all go down entire. The biggest fruits in the forest, the ones with a single great pit at the center that nothing else here can swallow, vanish whole into a cassowary. There is a quiet joke folded into all of this. The animal we have built up into a monster, the dagger, the helmet, the flat, prehistoric stare, the deadliest bird alive, spends the real hours of its real days as a solitary gatherer of fallen fruit, walking the dim floor of the forest in the first light, eating what the trees have let go. Nothing about it, in that moment, looks like a story worth telling. It is only a large dark bird, alone in the green, feeding. And yet something is happening here that the scene does not show, because those seeds it swallows so carelessly do not stay inside it. Hours later, somewhere else entirely, a valley over, a ridge away, wherever the walking has carried it by then, they come back out into the world, whole and unbroken and ready. And what becomes of them there is the part of this animal's story that no one, watching a bird quietly eat a piece of fruit, would ever think to guess. Here is what becomes of them. On the floor of the forest near Cape Tribulation, in a loose patch of broken sunlight, there is a small heap of cassowary droppings a day or two old, dark, fibrous, and studded all through with the seeds of everything the bird has lately eaten. And out of the middle of it, pale and just uncurling, a single seedling is coming up. There is nothing remarkable in the sight. If you knew to look, you could find 100 like it before the morning was out. What is remarkable is the odds. The seed that seedling grew from, had it simply dropped from its parent tree and lain where it landed, would almost certainly be dead by now, one more of the countless seeds a forest spends and loses every day. It is alive and rising toward the light for one reason and one only. Before it reached this spot, it went the whole way through a cassowary. For one of the trees that grows this way, a rare plant of the Daintree called Riparosa, someone took the trouble to measure exactly how much difference that makes. Left to itself, a Riparosa seed germinates at a rate of around 1 in 25, 4 in every 100, and no more. Passed through the gut of a cassowary and dropped back onto the forest floor, the very same kind of seed germinates at better than 9 in 10, 92%. The same seed, the same soil, the same patch of forest, and the single thing standing between a 4% hope and a near certainty is a slow journey through the inside of a bird. And it is not merely that the flesh gets cleaned away. Researchers have tried more than once to copy the effect by hand, stripping the pulp off, treating the seeds every way they could devise, and nothing they did came anywhere close. Whatever a cassowary's gut does to that seed has never once been reproduced outside a cassowary. What the bird actually does for the seed comes down to two things, and neither of them is magic. The first is simply distance. A seed that falls straight down lands in the most dangerous place there is for it, directly beneath its own parent, on a small square of ground already crowded with that same tree's fallen fruit and struggling seedlings, and thick with the particular insects, fungi, and diseases that have gathered there over the years to feed on exactly that one kind of plant. Under the parent tree, a seed is surrounded by everything that has learned to eat it. Most seeds that land there do not make it. A seed carried off inside a cassowary and set down half a valley away is simply handed a chance the fallen one never had. The second thing is stranger and belongs to seeds like ripperosas in particular. As the fruit works its way through, the gut strips off the flesh, and along with it, the tiny fruit fly grubs that would otherwise have tunneled into the seed and hollowed it out from the inside. What emerges at the far end is clean and whole and, for the first time in its short life, able to grow. And this is not one rare tree's private arrangement with one strange bird. It runs, in one form or another, straight through the forest. Cassowaries are the only animals in these rainforests large enough to swallow the biggest fruits whole, and there are dozens of trees here, somewhere between 45 and 70 species, whose fruit is simply too large for anything else to take and carry. A rodent can gnaw the flesh and leave the stone where it lies. A smaller bird can lift a small seed a short way, but the great stone-hearted fruits, the ones built around a pit the size of a golf ball or larger, have precisely one animal willing and able to take the whole thing and move the seed somewhere new, and that animal is the cassowary. For those dozens of trees, it is not one disperser among many. It is the disperser, the single courier the largest seeds in the forest have ever had. This is what ecologists mean by a keystone, one species quietly carrying far more of the whole than its numbers could ever suggest, so that its loss would pull a great deal else down after it. And it carries those seeds a long way, follow where they come back out, and a cassowary moves them, on average, a few hundred meters from the tree that dropped them, and a small, vital fraction of them, some 4 in every 100, it carries more than a full kilometer before it lets them go. In the close weave of a rainforest, a kilometer is an immense distance for a seed to travel. It is far enough to cross a clearing, to reach an untouched hillside, to set a tree's offspring growing in ground the parent's line has never held, far enough to keep the whole forest moving and mixed and connected, rather than slowly settling into place and going still. Nothing else here shifts the big seeds at all, and certainly not that far. So here, at last, is the thing the quiet picture of a bird eating fruit was keeping from us. The animal we spent a century building into a monster, the shy one, the solitary one, the one walking the forest floor gathering up windfalls, is, in the plainest and most literal sense there is, planting the forest around it. It carries the seeds of dozens of great trees out into new country, and for some of them it does more than carry. It makes them able to grow at all. Alone, unpaid, and entirely unaware, it is doing a job the whole forest is built upon, and nothing else alive can do. What the forest would do without it is the question that follows, and honesty asks for some care with the answer, because the plain truth is that no one has ever watched it happen. You cannot lift a keystone out of a living forest and film the outcome. The outcome would take far longer to arrive than any of us have to stand and watch for it. But the reasoning is hard to escape. Take away the only courier of the largest seeds, and those trees would begin, slowly, to stay where they are. Their fruit would fall and rot in the shade of the parent and go nowhere. Across the long generations of trees, a span measured in centuries, not years, the big seeded species would thin out faster than they could replace themselves, and the forest that had grown up leaning on them, on their fruit and their shade and their particular place in the whole, would be expected to shift and simplify and settle into something smaller and poorer than the forest standing there today. Not a collapse anyone could witness in a lifetime, but a slow coming apart that we can reason our way toward and have, so far, never had to see. None of which should be mistaken for a gentle fable about a noble creature tending its garden. The cassowary is not tending anything. It carries the good seeds and the bad ones with exactly the same indifference. It will just as readily plant the seed of an invasive weed, the pond apple, and has helped push that pest deeper into the very forests it holds together. It is not a caretaker, it is a force, as blind and impartial as weather, that the forest has simply, over a very long time, come to lean its whole weight against. And the cassowary, of course, knows none of it. It has no more notion that it is the reason the forest holds together than it has that it outlived the dinosaurs, or that its own voice travels below the floor of human hearing. It walks the wet floor of the forest in the early light, and it eats the fruit that has fallen, and it moves on, and the seeds ride through it and out into the world, and the great trees go on standing because of it. It just keeps eating, and all around it, holding still in the green and dripping air, stands a whole forest that has quietly staked its entire future on a single bird that has no idea it is carrying it. A patch of rainforest near Mission Beach looks at first glance like everything a rainforest should be. The canopy is closed and high overhead. The light comes down green and broken. The trees are enormous, mossed and buttressed and hung with vines, and there is birdsong in the branches and the smell of wet growth in the air. But the forest is a small one now, a fragment hemmed in on every side by cane fields and roads and houses, and the cassowaries that once moved through it have grown few, and in some of these patches they are gone. A forest that is losing its cassowaries is a forest with a quiet problem, one that shows on no single day, and one worth standing still inside for a while. What happens to a place like this when it loses the one animal it cannot replace? Some of the answer is already visible if you know where to look, and some of it can only be reasoned. Under the biggest of the old trees, the great heavy fruits fall as they always have. And then, more and more, they simply stay there, mounding up in the leaf litter beneath the parent, softening and rotting where they land, going nowhere at all. There is no longer anything walking through with a throat wide enough to take them and carry them off. That much you can see. What you cannot see, because it plays out across the lives of trees rather than the lives of people, is what follows from it. The old giants still stand, and will stand for a long time yet, but fewer and fewer of their young are coming up somewhere new to take their place, and a forest that cannot replace its largest trees is a forest quietly living on what it already has. And here the right word becomes genuinely hard to find. Is that collapse? No, nothing is falling. Walk into one of these fragments and you will see a healthy rainforest, closed and green and full. Is it fine then? Also no. A forest that has stopped restocking its biggest trees is not fine, whatever it looks like on the surface. The truth lives in an uncomfortable place between those two words, in a change too slow and too quiet for either of them to catch. A forest gradually losing the ability to keep being the forest it is, one unplanted generation at a time, with no single day that could ever be pointed to and called the beginning. It is worth being precise about where the danger actually lies. It is not, in the end, that the forest is being broken into pieces. Where the cassowaries themselves hang on, they go on doing their work, even in the cut-up remnants, moving what seeds they can from one patch to the next. The danger is narrower and simpler than that, and harder to undo. It is the bird itself going. Lose the forest around the bird, and you have a smaller forest. Lose the bird, and even the forest that remains begins, slowly, to come undone. And this is not a problem confined to a few small patches behind Mission Beach. Draw the frame back to its full size, and what leans on this bird is one of the great forests of the world. The wet tropics of northeastern Queensland run in a green belt down the coast, thousands of square kilometres of rainforest whose lineages reach all the way back to the dawn of the flowering plants. A living record of how the green world was assembled, layered and interwoven, an old, almost past reckoning. Its richness is difficult to overstate, a catalogue of trees and vines and ferns found nowhere else on Earth. And the big seeded heart of all of it, the giants, the ones that hold the greatest share of the forest's structure and life, depends in the end on the same shy, uncommon, rarely glimpsed bird to keep its heaviest seeds on the move. A whole world of forest, quietly held up in part by an animal most of the people living beside it will go their entire lives without seeing. It is worth bringing that back down from a whole forest to a single bird, because that is the scale at which the loss actually happens. Along Cooper Creek, in the territory Big Bertha has held for 30 years, there was a young female the watchers there had named Wundu. She hatched and grew up the way all of them do under her father, striped and then plain brown, learning the ground behind him. For a while she was simply one of the forest's cassowaries, going about the long, slow work of being one. And then, one season, she was seen limping, and after that, she was not seen again. The people who had watched her grow, who knew her on sight, simply stopped finding her, and never learned why. A dog, perhaps, or a car on one of the roads, or a wound that turned, or nothing anyone could name. She was one bird, and by any measure that could be put to it, her disappearance changed nothing. But this is exactly and only how a forest loses its keystone, not in a single visible catastrophe, but one Wundu at a time, each bird slipping quietly out of the picture, each carrying off a share of the forest's future that no one will notice is missing until, 100 years on, the young trees fail to come. The bond between this bird and these trees did not begin in our lifetime, and it will not be measured in it. It reaches back through a stretch of time long enough that the trees and the bird grew up around one another, the trees over the ages, coming to bear fruit a cassowary could swallow, the bird coming to move seeds nothing else could carry, each of them slowly shaped by the presence of the other until the two could no longer easily be pulled apart. It is a partnership written on a timescale closer to that of mountains than of animals, and we have arrived at the very tail of it, the first generation of human beings with the power to end a thing that took the better part of forever to build, standing at the edge of it and only now beginning to understand what it is. And yet we are not the first people to live alongside this bird, nor the first to depend on it. Long before anyone thought to measure a germination rate, or drew a boundary around a World Heritage Forest, or gave a single cassowary a name and followed her for 30 years, there were people who knew this animal, who knew it more closely and for far longer than we do. What they understood about it and what they made of it is a stranger and older story than the forest itself. The cassowary is not at heart an Australian bird. Its true homeland is the great island of New Guinea, just to the north, where more kinds of cassowary live than anywhere else on Earth, and where people have shared their forests with these birds for far longer and far more closely than anyone in Queensland ever has. And it is there, in the floors of caves and rock shelters where highland families sheltered and cooked and lived across tens of thousands of years, that archaeologists have been sifting out something no one quite expected. Fragments of cassowary eggshell, thousands upon thousands of them, some of them very old indeed. When those fragments were finally read closely, they pushed the history between people and this animal back further than almost anyone had dared to guess. Past the first farms, past the first written word, to a time when people may already have been doing the single last thing you would expect anyone to attempt with a cassowary. They were, it seems, raising them. The evidence is in the shells themselves. A team led by the archaeologist Christina Douglas, working with two highland sites called Yuku and Kiowa, gathered more than 1,000 fragments of eggshell laid down between roughly 18 and 6,000 years ago and worked out a way of reading them that had never quite been tried. It turns out that from the inner surface of a broken piece of eggshell, you can tell how far the chick inside had grown before the shell was opened. whether the egg was taken early as food or left almost to the point of hatching, and the pattern in these shells leaned hard in one direction. Most of them had come from eggs in their very last stage of development, right on the edge of hatching, and most carried none of the scorching you would find if the eggs had simply been dropped in a fire and cooked, which points carefully and tentatively towards something remarkable. That these people were not merely collecting eggs to eat, but selecting them, tending them, and hatching them out. The researchers put it about as cautiously as it can be put, that this may be the earliest sign anywhere on Earth of human beings managing the breeding of a bird, thousands of years before anyone first kept a chicken or a goose. It is worth sitting with the number because the number is where the astonishment lives. 18,000 years. At that point in the human story, there was no farming anywhere in the world. There was no writing, no wheel, no pottery in most places, and the last great ice age still had its grip on the planet. And already, in the high forests of New Guinea, someone was carrying a heavy green egg home to a shelter and keeping it warm and waiting out the long weeks for the striped chick inside to break its way into a human household. Whatever we take our own relationship with this bird to be, the fear, the fascination, the recent scramble to keep it from vanishing, the real relationship is older than nearly everything we are used to calling civilization. There is a reason the thing could be done at all, and it lies in the chicks. A newly hatched cassowary, like the young of many ground-dwelling birds, imprints. In its first hours, it locks onto the first large, moving, attentive thing it meets and decides once and for all that this is its parent, to be followed everywhere it goes. In the wild, that thing is the father. But a cassowary chick that hatches in a human hut fixes just as firmly on a person, and from that moment trails them everywhere, a small striped shadow underfoot, utterly certain of who it belongs to. Raised so, the chicks are simple enough to keep and grow up half-tame among people, a huge and formidable animal that had, in the only sense that means anything to it, chosen the family it was given to. That, most likely, is what those ancient eggshells record. Not a meal eaten and forgotten, but the start of a household's own cassowary. And the bond went a great deal deeper than mere keeping. To the peoples of the New Guinea highlands, the cassowary was never just a useful animal or a store of meat on two legs. It held a place in the order of the world, unlike anything else in the forest. The anthropologist Ralph Bulmer spent years among one such people, the Kalam, and took the puzzle for the title of his best-known work. Why is the cassowary not a bird? Because to the Kalam, it is not one. Ordinary birds are their own category, feathered, flying, unremarkable. And the cassowary stands entirely outside it, in a class of its own, reckoned closer to kin than to game. Perhaps it is that the cassowary, alone among the great animals of the forest, stands and walks upright on two legs as a person does, and lives its solitary, secretive life half hidden in the trees, and looms large in the oldest stories. Whatever the root of it, the Kalam treat the bird as a kind of relative, surrounded with rules and taboos, hunted, when hunted at all, with the wariness and respect owed to something nearly family, and spoken of, in certain settings, in a special language kept for it alone. A reared cassowary was among the most valuable things a person could own or give away. In the old ceremonial exchanges, a single bird is said to have been worth very nearly the price of a bride. It is a humbling thing to sit with. We tend to talk about the cassowary as though we were the ones who found it, as though its life were a set of facts lying in wait for our cameras and our studies. But people knew this animal and knew it well, 18,000 years before any of that, knew it closely enough to hatch it and raise it, and argue over what kind of being it even was, and decide in the end that it was something very like one of their own. Set against a bond as old and as considered as that, the reputation we have hung on the bird in the last 100 years, that it is, above all, a thing to be feared, starts to look like a very young and very thin idea. Picture then the figure at the far end of all that history, a grown cassowary standing in the packed earth of a highland clearing, in the smoke and quiet of the evening, among the people who hatched it and raised it and would not quite agree to call it a bird. A closeness between our kind and this one so old that almost nothing else we have ever done can match it for sheer age. For something like 18,000 years, wherever people lived nearest to this animal, they knew it as treasure, as kin, as a thing owed care and respect, and a place in the story of the world. And then, in the last 100 years or so, in the other half of its range, our species arrived at a wholly different way of living beside it. One that has turned out to be, for the cassowary, by a long way the most dangerous relationship it has ever had. A little way south of the town, the road runs straight through what is left of the forest, and every few hundred meters, a yellow diamond sign stands at the verge with the black silhouette of a cassowary on it and a number underneath, the distance over which the sign warns these birds are known to cross. On a wet afternoon, the traffic is light and unhurried. The wet season slows everything here, and the sound of a single car carries a long way, the hiss of tires on soaked bitumen, and then the small drop in pitch as the driver, seeing something ahead, eases off the accelerator, because there is something ahead. A cassowary has come out of the trees on the left, an adult, and it is standing half on the shoulder and half on the road. Not crossing, not fleeing, simply waiting, its head up, watching the car with a calm and terrible lack of fear. It has learned, somewhere along this road, that a slowing car sometimes means food, and it has never learned, or has forgotten, that the same car can just as easily mean death. And so it does the single most dangerous thing a wild animal can do in a place like this. It steps toward the danger, expecting to be fed. This is how the world's most dangerous bird actually dies, not in some last stand against a rival or a predator, but here on the tarmac or in a suburban backyard at our hands and by our machines. When researchers went back through the records of cassowary deaths in the wet tropics, the cause that came up more often than any other, by a wide margin, was the motor vehicle. Better than half of all the deaths they could account for, around 55%, were birds struck by cars. Another 18% were killed by dogs. Between them, cars and dogs make up close to 3/4 of every cassowary death anyone has managed to trace. One long study of the roads alone counted 185 confirmed road deaths across a few decades, and around Mission Beach, in the worst years, roughly 3 out of every 4 cassowaries found dead had been hit on a road. The bird a whole century learned to be afraid of is, in the plainest accounting, being quietly wiped out by hatchbacks and family dogs. And each of those birds is more than a single death. Every cassowary that goes under a wheel is also a courier lost, one of the forest's few great planters gone, and with it some share of the trees whose seeds it alone would have carried on into the years ahead. The cruelest part of it circles all the way back to the reputation. The boldness the cassowary is famous for was never really in the bird. We taught it, one hand out at a time, until it forgot to be afraid of us. And that same lesson is what kills it. A cassowary that has learned to link people with food loses its fear of the places people are, the picnic ground, the back garden, and above all the road where a slowing car has come, more than once, carrying something to eat. The wariness that would have kept it safe in the trees is precisely the wariness we have fed out of it. So the grapes tossed from a car window, the bread left on a back step, the driver who pulls over to let the tame bird step closer for a photograph, all of it, meant as kindness or curiosity or simple delight, is teaching the animal to stand exactly where the next car will not have room to stop. We made it unafraid of us, and then we killed it for coming close. The dogs are a quieter killer, and they fall hardest on the young. A grown cassowary can hold its own against most things, but a striped chick or a half-grown juvenile still finding its feet is no match for a dog off its lead, and the loss to the next generation is heavy. And beneath all of it runs the slowest pressure of all. The narrow coastal strip these birds depend on has been cleared and drained and built over for more than a century, until only a fraction of the old forest remains, cut into islands by cane fields and housing estates, and the very roads the birds now die on. An animal that could once have crossed unbroken forest for miles must now, over and over, step out of one green fragment onto a road and try to reach the next. The birds are dying in the end, trying to do the one thing they have to do in order to live, which is to move. There is a bitter symmetry in all of it that is hard to shake. The animal we built into a monster, the one we called the deadliest bird alive and warned each other to fear, turns out to die again and again in the most ordinary and domestic ways there are, under a family car on a school-run road, in the jaws of a pet, in a forest quietly shrinking around it, and most of what draws it into harm's way is not cruelty at all, but its opposite, people being kind or curious or simply careless with their kindness. Back on the wet road, the bird is still standing on the shoulder, head high, watching the traffic with that awful composure, indifferent to the danger it once seemed to pose, and blind to the far greater danger it is in. It will most likely be lucky today. On some other afternoon, on some other stretch of road, one of them will not. And yet, for all its steady, grinding toll, the traffic is a danger these birds meet one at a time. Every so often the sky itself turns on their forests and does something far worse, something that can empty a whole coast of its cassowaries, not one by one, but all at once. The strangest thing about a cyclone, from a cassowary's point of view, is that the wind is not the part that kills it. On the morning after the storm, the forests behind Mission Beach looked as though a war had passed through them. The great trees that had stood for centuries were snapped off halfway up or torn out of the ground entirely, their root plates standing on end like broken dinner plates. What was still upright had been stripped bare, not a leaf left on it, so that the canopy that had been closed and green and dripping the day before was now open to a hard, flat sky, brown and skeletal in every direction. The air was thick with the smell of sap and torn wood, and the first sourness of things beginning to rot, and it was quiet, unnervingly so, the roar of the night before replaced by the drip of water and the creak of ruined timber. The wind had done its work and moved on. But for the cassowaries that had crouched down somewhere and lived through the night, the real danger was only beginning, because in the space of a few hours the storm had taken away not their lives but every last scrap of their food. The storm was Cyclone Yasi, and it had crossed the coast at Mission Beach in the dark hours of the 3rd of February 2011 with gusts near 290 kilometers an hour, one of the most powerful cyclones ever to strike the Australian mainland. A cassowary is a hard animal to kill outright with wind. It can hunker into the lee of a bank or a fallen trunk and simply endure. What it cannot endure is what the wind leaves behind. In a single night, Yasi had stripped the fruit from every tree still standing, flattened the fruiting canopy that fed the whole forest, and turned a landscape thick with food into a wasteland of splintered wood and bare branches. And a fruit eater in a forest with no fruit is an animal on a slow and certain clock. The wind kills a few. The hunger that follows kills far more. In the weeks after the storm, the cassowaries did the thing that would prove most dangerous of all. Hungry, with nothing left in the wreck of the forest, they walked out of it, onto the roads, into the ruined gardens, through the shattered towns, searching anywhere and everywhere for something to eat. Birds that a month before had been fat and glossy turned up on the edges of town, gaunt and unsteady, doing in broad daylight, out in the open, all the things a cassowary spends its whole life avoiding, and so every ordinary hazard of the modern coast, the cars and the dogs, fell at once on a population already starving and desperate and exposed. In the year that followed Yasi, at least 19 cassowaries were found dead around Mission Beach. And 5 years earlier, after Cyclone Larry had torn through the same country, conservationists had feared, though in truth no one could ever count it properly, that something like a third of the local birds had been lost to the hunger and to everything that came with it. As the birds began to starve, people did the only thing they could think to do. Rangers and wildlife carers and volunteers, the Park Service, the local conservation groups, the Rainforest charities, loaded up fruit and carried it into the broken forest and set it out. They built feeding stations, dozens of them at first and then more than 100, strung all along the coast from Innisfail down to Cardwell, and kept them stocked for months, across the long, hungry gap between the storm and the day the forest could feed itself again. At a station in a clearing, often no more than a plastic tub of chopped fruit set out on the bare ground, a cassowary would step from the ruined trees, hesitate a long moment at the edge of the open, and then come to it and eat. There is something worth pausing over in the picture of it. Human beings walking into a wrecked rainforest with buckets of fruit day after day to hand-feed a wary, solitary, dagger-footed bird that has spent its whole long history wanting nothing whatever to do with them. And here is the part that makes it stranger still. Feeding cassowaries is, in the ordinary run of things, one of the worst things a person can do to them. It is the very habit that turns a shy bird bold and lands it under a car. The people carrying the fruit knew that better than anyone. They kept the stations back from the roads, ran them only for as long as they had to, and did it regardless, because the choice in front of them was never really between feeding and not feeding. It was between feeding and standing by while the birds starved. Slowly, over the following seasons, the forest came back. The bare wood put out new leaves. The surviving trees flowered and fruited again. The feeding stations came down, one by one, as the birds drifted back into a forest that could once more keep them alive. The whole system, the bird, the forest, the storm, and the human hands that had reached in to steady it, settled back towards something like balance, at least for a while. But when it was over, and someone finally tried to reckon up what the storm had cost, the simplest question of all turned out to have no clear answer. How many cassowaries had there been before Yasi, and how many were left after it? For all the fruit carried into the forest, and all the birds pulled back from the edge of starving, no one could say with any real confidence how many there had ever been to save. It is a strange thing to pour that much care into keeping an animal alive, and to realize in the quiet afterward that you have never once been able to count it. On paper, the cassowary is not an animal in any particular trouble. Turn to the great global register of endangered species, the list that decides which creatures the world ought to worry about, and you will find it filed under the mildest of all the categories: least concern. It is the same label given to the pigeon and the house sparrow, and it reads at a glance like a small reassurance. It is also, for anyone living where these birds actually live, deeply misleading. And to understand why is to run straight into how hard it is to know anything at all about an animal you can almost never see. Somewhere in the wet tropics, on almost any given week, there is a fair chance that a researcher is crouched on the forest floor, easing a single fresh cassowary dropping into a sample bag and marking down where it was found. Not because anyone has managed to see the bird, but because bagging what it leaves behind is very nearly the only way there is to take a census of a ghost. The trouble with that reassuring label is that it describes the wrong thing. Least concern is the rating for the whole species right across its range, and the great bulk of that range is not Australia at all, but the vast forests of New Guinea, where cassowaries of several kinds are still relatively many. The birds this story has followed, the ones in the wet tropics of Queensland, are another matter entirely. Under Australia's own laws, they are listed as endangered and have been for years. And there is a detail buried in the record that ought to stop anyone who reads it. Not long ago, the global list actually relaxed, moving the species down from a higher level of concern to least concern, growing less worried about the animal as a whole in the very same years that the Australian birds went on struggling. It is a global average quietly smoothing over a regional emergency, a single soothing word laid across a much harder truth. And that truth is genuinely difficult to pin down, because these birds cannot be counted the way most animals are. You cannot walk a line through the forest and tally them by eye. There are too few of them, and they are too shy, and the trees swallow them whole, so the counting is done sideways, through what they leave behind. Researchers gather droppings from all across the forest, pull the DNA from each one, and read it. And because every cassowary carries its own unique code, a scattered handful of droppings can be sorted patiently into a roll call of individual birds, each one identified without ever once being seen. It is slow, unglamorous, expensive work, years of collecting and sequencing to arrive at a single approximate figure. The best of these efforts have put the number of cassowaries in the Australian wet tropics at somewhere around 4,000, give or take. But every researcher who offers that number hurries to add the same warning, that no one really knows. The country is vast and steep and thick. The birds are ghosts, and 4,000 is a careful, hard-won estimate, not a head count. Here the honesty has to run in two directions at once. The gentle label lulls, it lets the crisis vanish behind a comfortable word. But the loudest version of the opposite story, that the cassowary is plunging right now toward its end, is not what the best evidence shows either. What the careful counting suggests is quieter and stranger than either alarm, that the wet tropics population, as far as anyone can tell, has held more or less steady for decades, not crashing, not recovering, just holding precariously at a low level under unrelenting pressure from the roads and the dogs and the ever-shrinking forest. The real state of the cassowary refuses both the comfort of least concern and the drama of nearly gone. It is an animal that is genuinely at risk, genuinely holding on, and genuinely impossible to count, all at the same time. Whatever the real figure is, it is small. 4,000 birds, more or less, for the whole of Australia, every wild cassowary on the continent brought together in one place, would not fill a modest football stadium. And set against that uncountable stadium-sized whole is a strange, tender counterweight, the tiny handful of birds we know so well that they have become, in themselves, a kind of data. The population as a whole is a smear of uncertainty. Big Bertha, watched along her creek for 30 years, is a face. She is one animal, but she is also 3 unbroken decades of record. A single cassowary so thoroughly known that she stands in for statistics we cannot otherwise gather. And then there are the birds hauled back from the edge, one at a time. In the last months of 2024, 2 orphaned chicks, their father killed on a road near Innisfail, were taken into care raised by hand for the better part of a year, and, on a bright winter morning in 2025, driven out to Japoon National Park and let go. Someone lifted a latch, and two young cassowaries, named Arthur and Martha by the people who had raised them, stepped out of their crates, stood a moment in the open, and walked off into the trees, to become, from that instant, two more ghosts in a number nobody can quite fix. There is a peculiar vertigo in all of this, an animal we can neither properly count nor quite manage to lose, held in place by the stubborn care of people who have decided to bet on it anyway, without ever being sure how much there is to save. And through all of our counting and estimating and worrying, the bird itself carries on at a tempo that makes the whole exercise look very small. It has been walking these forests since long before there was anyone to tally it, and it keeps no count of itself. It simply persists the way it has persisted through everything else, wholly indifferent to the number we cannot agree on. Which is fitting in a way, because that uncertain number is very nearly the only thing about this animal we have any grip on at all. Almost everything else about it, from the crest on its head to whatever passes behind its eyes, is still a question no one has managed to answer. Go back one last time to a cassowary standing in the grey light before dawn, filling its throat and letting out that impossibly deep boom, the note that rolls out through the forest below the reach of a human ear. We know a great deal about that sound now, its pitch, near 32 cycles a second, and the strange business of the gulp and the swelling neck that produces it. We can say with real confidence what the cassowary is sending out into the dark. And yet the most basic question you could ask about the whole performance has never once been answered. Can the cassowary hear it? Nobody knows. No one has ever tested a cassowary's hearing, not what range of sounds it can pick up, not whether its own ear reaches down into the register of its own voice. We have measured, with enormous care, a call that we cannot prove the animal making it can hear. It is a strange gap to sit inside. The voice and the ear are two different instruments, and we have only ever taken one of them apart. There is no audiogram for a cassowary, no chart of the frequencies it responds to, nothing at all on the receiving end to set beside everything we have learned about the sending. It may be that the birds hear one another's booms perfectly well across a mile of forest, exactly as the idea assumes. It may be that they feel them as much as hear them, through the ground and the air, the way you feel the lowest notes of an organ more in your chest than in your ears. Or it may be something no one has yet thought to look for. What we have is the precise measurement of a sound, hanging at the very edge of what our instruments can reach, and on the far side of it, a silence where the answer ought to be. And the ear, in the end, is the least of it. The deepest blank of all is the one behind the eyes. What is it actually like to be a cassowary? What does it see? What does it remember? What, if anything, does it turn over as it walks its patch of forest, hour after hour, year after year? We have very nearly no idea. Its intelligence has scarcely been studied at all. None of the famous experiments that made the crow and the parrot into celebrities of the animal mind, the tool-making, the counting, the tests of memory, has ever been run on a cassowary. What little indirect evidence there is leans gently away from any notion of a hidden genius. The celebrated finding that some birds pack primate-like numbers of neurons into their small brains turns out to be a story about parrots and songbirds, and the one close relative anyone has bothered to count, the emu, sits near the bottom of the scale, its large brain filled with relatively few and widely spaced cells. And yet even that is not the end of it, because that same emu handed a simple puzzle in a recent experiment, quietly worked out how to solve it, so the door is not entirely shut. We assume too that a cassowary must carry some kind of map of its forest, a memory of which trees, fruit, and when and where the good ground lies, since its whole life appears to run on exactly that. But even this, the thing everything else seems to depend on, has never actually been put to the test. The honest position is the plainest one. No one has properly looked, and the inner life of the cassowary is almost wholly unknown to us. Stand back and take in the shape of all this, because it is a humbling shape. We have followed this bird a long way. We have named its parts and measured its claw, traced its family back through 66 million years and the fire that ended the dinosaurs, worked out what it eats and how a whole forest comes to lean on it, sifted its droppings for its DNA, and followed single animals across 30 years of their lives. And when the whole of that is laid out, the list of things we still cannot answer about the cassowary is longer than the list of things we can. We cannot say for certain what the crest on its head is for. We do not know whether it hears its own voice. We can only guess to within a wide margin how many of them are left, and what it might be like from the inside to be one that we cannot even begin to say. For all our looking, the animal has kept the greater part of itself. There is a particular pleasure in that if you allow there to be, not a frustration, but something closer to relief. Here is an animal that has not been used up, that has not been fully explained, that stays, even now, mostly its own strange thing. We have looked at it about as hard as we know how, and it has not dissolved into a tidy set of answers. It remains, in the best sense of a word we tend to use carelessly, a wild thing, not merely uncaught, but genuinely unknown. The bird, of course, carries none of this. It is no puzzle to itself. It stands in the last of the dawn dark with all its secrets still on it, the unread crest, the untested ear, the unreachable mind, and then it turns without a sound and steps back into the trees and is gone, taking every one of its unanswered questions with it. And yet, for everything we cannot say about this animal, there is one thing we can, and it happens to be the thing that matters most in the end. We know now roughly where it stands, and how near the edge, and what, having come to understand even this little of it, we would be letting go of if we let it go. At the end of the day, in the last of the light along the edge of the Daintree, a cassowary walks out of the trees and stands for a moment where the forest gives way to open ground. The blue of its neck has gone dark in the failing light. The black of its body is already halfway into the shadow behind it. This is where the whole story began. A large, silent bird at the edge of the trees in the failing light, except that everything about how we see it now has changed. It is a single animal, one of a few thousand of its kind left on the entire continent, and it is standing, as it happens, at the exact edge of two futures. Behind it is the forest, old, deep, and for the moment still whole enough to hold it. In front of it, past the tree line, is everything that has made the last 100 years the hardest the cassowary has ever faced. The cleared land, the roads, the houses, the narrowing world. And the honest truth about where this bird stands tonight is that no one can tell you which way it is going to go. For most of its long history, the dangers the cassowary faced were the ordinary ones, and it met them the way it has met everything else, by being large and careful and very old at the business of surviving. What has changed, in the space of a human lifetime or two, is the world on the far side of the tree line. The forest this bird needs is not just any forest. It needs a great deal of it, connected, so that it can walk the long circuits that feed it and carry its seeds the distances that matter. And that is precisely the thing the modern world has been quietly taking away. The rainforests of this coast have been cut and cleared and parcelled until only a fraction of the old country remains, broken into islands by cane and housing and the roads that thread between them. Every separate danger this bird faces is, underneath, a version of the same squeeze. the roads it must cross and so often dies crossing, the dogs that arrive with the houses, the great storms that a shrunken and stressed forest takes longer and longer to recover from. The cassowary needs room and time and connection. It is being given less of all three. Set against that, the official verdict on the bird is a strange, split thing. To the wider world, it is a species of least concern, an animal, on paper, in no particular trouble, because across its whole range, most of which lies in New Guinea, it is still reasonably numerous. But the birds here, in Australia, the ones this story has followed through the Daintree and along the Mission Beach Road, are formally endangered and have been for years, and the best estimate anyone can offer puts their number at something like 4,000, a figure so uncertain that the people who produce it are the first to admit they cannot really be sure. What the careful work suggests is not a headlong collapse. The population here seems to have held more or less at its low and precarious level for decades. But holding is not the same as safe. It is an animal balanced on a narrow ledge, in no immediate danger of falling and with no clear way back up either. And which way it goes from here depends far less on the bird than on us. And the stakes are larger than the bird itself. This is the thing the whole long look at the cassowary keeps circling back to. It is not merely a species that might be lost, but a keystone holding up a great deal else. Let the cassowaries thin out of these forests, and the forests do not simply miss them. Over the slow generations of trees, they begin quietly to come apart, the biggest and oldest of them left with no way to move their seeds and no young rising to take their place. The animal we spent a century fearing turns out to be one of the last things keeping its entire world stitched together. To lose it would be to lose, by slow degrees, a good part of the forest along with it, and most likely to do so without ever seeing the moment it began. None of this is written yet. There are people, rangers, scientists, wildlife carers, the ones who bag the droppings and mend the orphans and lie awake over the road death figures, who have chosen to spend a real part of their lives on the far side of that uncertainty, betting on a bird they cannot count in a fight no one can promise them they will win. They slow the traffic where they can. They stitch the forest back together, corridor by corridor. They carry fruit into the wreckage after the storms. Whether it will be enough, nobody knows. The cassowary's future is not a tragedy already written, and it is not a rescue already earned. It is genuinely open, one of those rare, uncomfortable places where the story could still go either way, and where the going of it rests, for once, in our hands. If there is a single thing this animal has to teach, it is not a comfortable lesson, and it is not really about us at all. It is this, that a whole living world can rest on the shoulders of a creature that has no idea it is carrying anything. The cassowary does not know it is a keystone. It does not know it is ancient or endangered, or the last disperser of 100 kinds of tree. It has no plan for the forest and no stake in its future that it could name. It simply walks and eats and moves on, and in the plain doing of that, entirely by accident, it keeps a world alive. There is something clarifying in that, once the fear and the folklore are stripped away. We are used to reserving our care for the clever animals, the ones with faces we can read and minds we can half recognize. The cassowary is neither. It is a strange, blank, unknowable thing that happens to be holding up a rainforest, and it would go on doing so, indifferent, whether or not a single human being ever understood it. And it is, even now, still doing it. Somewhere in the forests behind Tully tonight, a young cassowary is walking through the last of the light, one of the ones raised by hand and carried back into the wild perhaps, or one that made it through on its own. It hardly matters which. It is a few years old, its stripes long gone, its neck only just coming into colour. It eats a fallen fruit in the dusk, and then another, and moves on into the trees. And somewhere behind it, in the dark it has already left, the seeds it swallowed an hour ago are riding down toward the forest floor. Trees it will never see. In a forest it will not live nearly long enough to watch grow. It is planting a world it has no way of imagining for no reason it could give, simply because that is what a cassowary does. Stop for a moment before the light goes entirely and consider what is actually standing out there in the dusk. The ancestors of this bird were small and feathered and able to fly on the day, 66 million years ago, that a mountain of rock fell out of the sky and ended the age of the great dinosaurs. They were among the few things small enough and quick enough to live through the fire that came after. Everything since has happened on the far side of that catastrophe. The slow coming down out of the air, the swelling across the ages into a flightless giant, the 60-odd million years of walking these forests in more or less the shape it wears tonight. It flew through the end of one world and came down onto the floor of the next, and it is still here, in a wet forest at the bottom of the world, at the close of an ordinary day, doing the one patient thing it has always done. Eating the fallen fruit, carrying the seeds, setting the next forest growing in the dark behind it, without the faintest notion that it is doing anything at all. An animal that outlasted the dinosaurs, still quietly planting the world it lives in. It does not know that we are here. It does not know that we exist. And for the length of this long look at it, it has been, in a way that is hard to explain, more real and more present than the room you are sitting in. And it has never for a single second needed you to be there. The light is nearly gone now. Out at the edge of the trees, the cassowary has finished feeding. It stands a moment longer in the last grey of the day, its head up, that ancient, unreadable eye turned for once in our direction. And there it is, seen plainly at last. Not the monster of the caption, not a marvel got up for our wonder, but only an animal, very old, very strange, mostly unknowable, looking back at us across the dusk. It holds the look for a second, perhaps two. Whatever passes behind that eye, we will never know. We have already had to admit as much. Perhaps nothing, perhaps a wariness as old as its line. It does not come closer, it does not flinch away. It simply looks the way it has looked at everything for 66 million years. And then, having taken our measure and found in us nothing that concerns it, it turns, and it is gone. Back into the trees without a sound, the black of it folding into the dark until there is nothing left to see. Somewhere in there, it is already walking again, already feeding, already carrying tomorrow's forest in its gut. Exactly as it was before we came, exactly as it will be long after we have gone. The forest keeps it now. It asks nothing of us. It never did. Sleep well.